Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mastering the Drop, a real view of recovery. We are back here for our June edition, and we do have Dr. Melissa. She's going to be with us here really shortly. Rebecca had to cancel today because she's feeling under the weather. However, she will be here next week, so we will make sure to bring all of her key elements in next week. But I want you to know that this month is really special to me because we are going to be talking about some of the ramifications that are not widely known about addiction and what holistically we can do about a lot of these things. And today, what I really want to do is I want to carry on some of this conversation from last week about codependency and bring in some of those anxiety elements and as well as alcohol. And so that we can really start to talk about what we can use, what we should never combine, and what it will look like when we do. So if I may, I'd like to move into things that I know to be true from my own journey, my own story, my own walk, but also in the work that I do with so many. So how do we arrive in this place of codependency? In fact, actually right this minute, I'm going to shut down my web browser so that we have good feed going in here and my wonderful internet isn't acting all shoddy. Anyway, codependency. How do we become codependent? I get asked this question all the time. Generally, what we find when we get to that piece of it is there's a certain dialogue that goes on inside for us. And a lot of times what that sounds like is I feel, I believe, I perceive that my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my opinions, my beliefs are not seen as valid and quite frequently aren't experienced as adding any value. Subsequently, I quite frequently feel dismissed and disposable in my relationships, in my communities, in my environments, in my space of work, whatever it is, right? So we have these thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, and beliefs that we so desperately believe in, but feel like it's not seen as such in others. So what do? We start reaching and giving of ourselves and giving and doing and always putting other people's requests, needs, wants from us in a higher position. And so that always comes first. We feel like if I can only be everything that they need me to be, then I will be adding value. I will be seen as valid and having valid thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, and beliefs. And so we get sucked into this need to be acknowledged, to be experienced, to be needed, to be wanted, so that internal dialogue will hopefully change. Only it doesn't. It generally gets, dare I say, worse or exacerbated. And so we get into these spaces of anxiety because now it's a lot of now what? What's next? That future tripping, anxiety-inducing uncertainty of will whatever it is I'm doing be good enough? Will my availability be enough? Will whatever it is be enough? Also, with anxiety, we find a lot of times that it's that what if they don't like it? What if what if I'm not there on time? We have all these pressures on ourselves. I should be able to do but they're asking me. I should be able to get everything done on my list. I should be able to, I'm going to let Dr. Melissa in. I should be able to, I should be able to accomplish everything that I've set out to accomplish. I should be able to do all of these things. And so inside that, we are creating anxiety over and above what might already be organically there from a physiological standpoint, because I get it, there is that physiological piece where, wow, I wake up in the morning and I start to feel it in here, and it just feels like all of a sudden I can't breathe and my heart is racing, but then the brain is engaging in it and it just starts this big cycle mental real loop. Dr. Melissa, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Trish, for having me. My apologies for being a few minutes late.
All good, all good. And you know what? I think, Rebecca was also just feeling a bit under the weather. So I told her, I'll see you next week and we'll have our conversation then. So this is going to be, a good space. You didn't miss much. Really what I've shared with people is kind of how we get to this place of codependency and how it's generally stemming from an internal dialogue that says something along the lines of my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my opinions, my beliefs, my needs, wants, and desires are seen as not holding value, and they aren't seen as valid. And so we subsequently feel very dismissed or disposable. And when we get into that headspace, that will prompt anxiety-inducing behaviors, that what if, that overbooking of the calendar, needing to be all and everything for everybody just so that we might get one little ounce of a stamp of approval, if you will. And so we're constantly, worrying about how we can appease. And so then we get into these should statements about how I should be able to get everything done on my list. I should be able to, create a better presentation. I should be able to, get these tasks done more timely. All of those things that are filled with pressure that really just generate anxiety. And so, so I'm kind of going on this little journey path here of not only my own journey, but of the journey that I see in others. But we get to that place of anxiety, that future tripping dialogue that gets inside of our head that's filled full of pressures. And then what? Now we're not only reaching to other people for approval, but now we're reaching outside of ourselves for some sort of comfort, right? Some sort of relief. And so that might look like, alcohol, when we feel so depleted and sad because, our perception is that other people didn't perceive that we did enough. Again, this is all just premonition stuff. It's not even the true real thing that's happening. It's just the story that we're making up in our head. And now we get to the end of our day and we're mitigating with alcohol. It could be even in the middle of the day. You might be walking around the house going, wow, I'm just not appreciated. And all of these things. And so now suddenly we're, we're reaching the things outside of ourselves. And for some people that's brownies. For some people that's, I'm going to go on a shopping spree, but none of those things are actually going to relieve it. But I think what's important right now that we look at is, so for years you've been, relying on the alcohol to bring you calm, right? To bring you peace, to take the edge off of the irritation, agitation, annoyance, or to soften the feeling of being undervalued and dismissed. And that's not working as well anymore. And suddenly you feel like that anxiety is turned into a physical thing. Like, I just have anxiety and I'm just anxious all the time and I'm always worried and I'm always shaky and I can't articulate my words and all of these things, right? We all know what I'm talking about, and I'm sure everybody can feel it because I've lived it, I get it, I understand. Then what we end up doing is we go, hey, doc, whichever doc you go to, right? We all go, or we're talking to a girlfriend and they're like, oh, you should go to see your doctor. They'll give you something for that. It just takes the edge off and it's great. So then you get there and you go, hey, doc, this is what's happening. I'm experiencing anxiety. I feel real panically all the time. I'm experiencing shortness of breath, yada, yada. doctor does what doctor knows to do, which is prescribe a little pill. And this maybe won't be true for everybody, but it's how it happened for me. My doctor knew me and knew me very well, knew I was a daily drinker, low level, super low level alcoholic, but like my low 3 Coors Lights every day, still prescribed me Xanax for that anxiety. And sure, I'm an adult. I can read the bottle, don't use them together, right? It may cause extreme side effects, whatever. But what you don't know is this, is that those two chemicals that you're utilizing and relying on to lessen your anxiety so you can have a higher level of feelings of self-worth are really synergistically exacerbating the anxiety and the dependence on them. And really, everybody, I'm sure if you're listening, you get it, right? Addiction, sure, okay, Trisha, we're building tolerance. Sure, this is like nothing you've ever experienced before. I'm not even telling you. I'm not even, blowing this out of proportion. Eventually, over time, it will exacerbate it to a point where you have to have it to have any semblance of relief from anxiety. And it's crazy because now it's become physiological instead of a psychological issue. And so now you've compiled it. So what you think you're doing to help you find peace, joy, comfort, relief, relaxation, just a mindless moment where you're not overthinking and telling yourself all these stories over and over again in your head, those things that you're thinking, you're really creating a bigger issue. Now, I was diagnosed, right? Like, so we get these labels, generalized anxiety disorder with panic. Sure. Okay. Do I still suffer or struggle with some levels of anxiety? On some occasions. And it's usually because I haven't realized that, maybe my life's gotten a little too full. or that there's so much time that I'm focusing on doing fun things, right? So there's just not a balance. The balance gets cattywampus, and if every once in a while, if it creeps away from me, sure, I might feel a little bit of anxiety, and I'm like, oh, where's this coming from? And then I take 5 minutes and I look, and I'm like, okay, do some restructuring, do some whatever, and it's gone. So I know it to be true. And Dr. Melissa, I'm gonna have you come in here because I know that you and I are gonna have like such a great conversation about this. But I know this to be true. I know it to be true that I have the power to control whether or not I experience anxiety inside of my own mind by making the right choices of how I want to perceive whatever it is that's going on. I get to choose. I get to choose which direction I'm going with that. And yes, sometimes that means I just have to excuse myself altogether because it's not fitting, but it far beats, subjecting myself to something that's really going to cause me, to have panic. Like, I'm not going to get on a zip line when we go to Cabo this year if there's a lightning storm, like I did 2 years ago, because that was super derailing because I know it's a trauma response prompter for me. And the outcome was just not really pretty, right? And I don't drink anymore. So at the bottom of it, there wasn't a shot of tequila waiting for me to soothe that or comfort it, right? So sure, I have that power to choose. But for other types of maintenance, I have found that ashwagandha is something that is very beneficial for me in a broad spectrum. Now, I know we've talked about the brand that I use, and we're going to be working on changing that to something way better. But, and the ashwagandha helps with my body inflammation. So with all of my autoimmune issues, it helps support some of that. But really what it does is it helps support stress response inside of my body, and which also helps with the inflammation, but also with the attitudes, the mood, and feelings of being out of control. But it's natural. And the same goes for caffeine. I have lots to say there. We'll come back to that. But so, Melissa, share here, your thoughts and opinions about, this whole benzodiazepine, for people that know what that is, use for some of these anxiety disorders, and especially when we're, early in recovery, and how you see them to be beneficial, and where you think that there's better alternatives to try first. I'm always for try the natural first, but you might be backwards from that. I don't know.
So absolutely, Trisha. Thank you for having me, and let me address a couple of key things that you mentioned. And I want to start with a fun fact, because you said your physician knew you. She knew that you were a daily drinker, and yet she still prescribed you a benzodiazepine. Fun fact, physicians get approximately 1 semester of pharmaceutical training in all of their years of med school, and they are allowed to prescribe prescription medications. Pharmacists, on the other hand, get a whole lot more hours. So I had about 12,000 hours of pharmacy training during my schooling. And with my experience now, I have over 52,000 clinical hours of experience. And so when you look at that, and yes, when you go to the pharmacy to get something filled, the pharmacist doesn't typically know that you drink alcohol when they're filling that benzodiazepine, because that's not a question that your behind-the-counter pharmacist typically ask. And so your physician, as knowledgeable as he or she is, may not know all the ramifications behind some of those medications they can prescribe. They may not know the ramifications or good behind some of the supplements, because they don't get that education, that training as a general rule. Now, personally, for me speaking, because I do delve in both to the Eastern and the Western medicine, and you ask about natural being first, that depends. So natural does not equal safe. So let me point that out. Natural does not equal safe. Medication does not equal safe. So it's really up to the individual to figure out what is the best for you. Because yes, natural things like ashwagandha can still interact with your other medications or with other supplements. So like the alcohol and the benzodiazepine interacted together, ashwagandha can interact with things. There's other, like ginseng, you've probably heard of, valerian root, St. John's wort. Those are kind of bigger ones that we've heard of for years for calming effect or mood stability. They're equal in the natural realm to the benzodiazepines. The thing is that you've got to make sure that it's safe with you. You can't just go with what your girlfriend said, or just, you go to your doctor and you say, hey, I want to try ashwagandha. And your physician may go, well, I don't know, because they haven't done the research. So make sure you do the research and educate yourself to make sure it's not going to interfere with anything else that you're taking, medication, supplement, potentially even some things that you eat can interact with medications as well.
Interesting.
Alcohol, all of those play a role. So when we look at codependency, and if you are in early stages of recovery, and especially alcoholic, and you've given that up and you're prescribed a benzodiazepine, the same dependency can be had. It's a physical and a mental, because it's physically taking that pill to feel better. You've told your brain, I take this to feel better, just like you did your brain, I drink this to feel better. So there's that similarity. And yes, it can exacerbate the anxiety, make it last longer, especially used together, could be detrimental. It could actually cause that big, ugly word, death,
Mm-hmm.
And we want to avoid that. So we want to figure out what is the safest for each of you in your personalized therapeutic recovery plan, and what might be right for you. The ashwagandha might be working for you, Trisha, a good quality brand will get you there. And it might not work as well for somebody else, and valerian might be a better choice for them. And these are things that have been around a while. These are ones that have had good studies behind them. I don't just bring different things up. You'll probably hear something new tomorrow, and until I see a little bit of research about it, I'm not gonna bring it up. Even different things like CBD. We've heard of CBD for calming and anxiety.
Mhm.
And yes, I can tell you that in certain cases, CBD is very beneficial. Also, you want to make sure the quality, the quality of your CBD, and you're wanting to get a THC free because you don't want to be hooked on something else,
Cross addiction's a real thing, peeps.
So those are some key points that I heard, and I think we can go anywhere else too.
Well, and so I like that. I love that you bring that up, because often we believe, because it's a supplement, vitamin, whatever, that it doesn't have anything to do with our prescription medication. So my little Rolodex of pill box, I went thumbing through that, because I've been, shifting more to the supplement versus prescription. So definitely something that I'm now going to say, wow, I feel like I'm doing okay. However, I think, just a second set of eyes is probably going to be like a really great thing. And so, we'll talk about that. You and I later, as we generally do. But, so I think that's really an important factor here, guys, is, a lot of times we go into recovery, and because we're sitting there super uncomfortable from alcohol withdrawal or whatever, the providers, whoever that may be, again, has not studied at great length pharmaceuticals, right? So like myself, I studied the synergistic effects of drugs and alcohol on the body. More very specifically, the very first paper / article that I wrote was on alcohol and benzodiazepines, right? And their synergistic effect, because it was important for me to learn what happened to me. And so that was my way of learning about it. And so it's still remains a very big passion of mine, is to, generate that awareness. Because even if we take away the alcohol, right? If we're sitting in anxiety because we're in alcohol withdrawal, sure. Like, I know when I was in detox, they wanted to give me a different benzo, right? What is it? I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden. It's very common. They use it for detox all the time, but it's, to help ensure that you don't have a seizure, right? Valium, that's the one. And I looked at them, I'm like, I don't need, if I wanted to take a anxiety pill, I'd take my Xanax, right? I just gave it to you. But, cooler heads prevailed, and I was like, okay, sure, I want to be safe. So I'll take it before I go to bed, because I want to wake up tomorrow. And that's cool. Luckily for me, my detoxification was nowhere near severe as anybody would have thought it would have been. But again, that I digress. So if you're going through detoxification, yes, you want to listen to the medical provider that is monitoring your vitals, right? But you also want to be your own advocate to say, I want the least amount possible, because believe me, they wrote scripts for things like Seroquel and all this stuff. And I was like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And they're like, we're going to have to tell the insurance company that you decline. And I'm like, okay, okay. I really want to get to a natural state of being and living. And so you have to be your own advocate. Okay, I will take this for my safety, but beyond that, I'm here because I have an addiction issue. If you say if you focus on your journey solely for, say, alcohol, and that's your only course, and we've talked about this before, I think it was a few weeks back, we were talking about diving into that rigorous exercise. Like, those cross addictions are real. It's like, okay, I get rid of my alcohol, but now I'm just going to, use the benzodiazepines. And so whenever you're weaning from those have a half-life. Those, the withdrawal from that's gonna be anxiety. At some point in time, you're gonna have to learn to sit in and move through the uncomfortable. Now, there are people that have organic anxiety disorders that truly need medication intervention. There's absolutely those. And I don't want to discount that, because I have worked with and I have seen, and I have also supported people remaining on. And I know a lot of the, we'll call it anonymous programs will not consider you to be 100% sober if you are utilizing things like medical, marijuana for medical reasons, right? Because that can be an effective anxiety med over the benzodiazepines. Or if say it's, and this is a topic that I think we're going to be, talking about more when we get into opiates, I think next week with Rebecca. But, that medication assisted programs to get you off, as a harm reduction, right? So, I know a lot of people, feel like I don't want to, I don't want anything, but there can be benefits, true?
There can be benefits, yes. And when you go into an assisted recovery program, our community, our Western society, our medical community, that assisted recovery program has been built off of the structure of Western medicine. And so very much so, they have studies that prove that Valium can help, that Seroquel can help. There's a whole host of other things that are used as well, just like other supportive vitamins and things that you're given when you go into that detoxification. Those are beneficial. Those are useful. And yes, at a certain point, you need to be able to wean off of them. And whether your medical provider is willing or able, you have to be your own advocate. And I think that's the thing is when you go in and you say, I want to be on more the natural path, they don't necessarily understand because it's driven by that physician who's overseeing the program and they're writing those prescriptions because that's what they know to do. And so educating yourself and being your own advocate and knowing that, okay, maybe I take this for a little while, short term, because yes, it's beneficial. Maybe a week. Yes. Maybe a week. Maybe 3 to 5 days to 7 days, I would say, depending upon where you're at in your recovery. If how much
I've seen 14. And again, if we're talking high levels of pain medication use over a lot of years, like say first responders, I've witnessed a lot of the older, more mature first responders. I don't want to, I'm in there in that age bracket as well. So I want to, but I've seen them come in and, they not only have they been battling PTSD, but, they've had accidents and injury on the job and have just, been on pain management forever. And now they're trying to get off. And I've seen it take them a couple rounds of medically supervised partial hospitalization to fully come out of that. And so, yes, you absolutely have to know, like, what is it really going to look like for me based on my physiological makeup, length of use, amount of use, and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And each of, we have statistics that show on average, it takes approximately, a month or whatever to get off of, maybe if you've been on, maybe not a month, let's say 6 months. If you've been actively an opiate addicted for 2 years, it's probably going to take you a minimum of 6 months in your initial phase of recovery. Your initial phase, there's going to be multiple phases. And so during that initial phase, you're going to be more dependent on a little crutch to help you, whether that's a prescription, a natural supplement, or even something that's not even not a supplement at all. There's some other devices, let's call them out there, that are supportive, that act to help your system. They help to retrain things, retrain your brain. And so there's various different things out there that can help you along in your recovery journey, depending upon where you're at and which phase. And each of those is going to take longer, take a certain amount of time. And don't cut yourself down if you take 7 months instead of 6 on your first phase, because it's your unique journey. And right. Number one, you said yes to you, and you said, hey, I want to change.
Right. Well, and I love that you brought up the phases, because, really when we're talking about this whole detoxification phase, we're really talking about stabilization, because what I know to be true, very true, is that post-acute withdrawal will still show up in people's lives for the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. Right. And it may go beyond that for others. Again, we don't know, because we'd have to do so many different studies on it and follow people for so long. And people would have to be dedicated to that study beyond a 2-year mark. Right. Mm-hmm. To say, high severity, moderate severity, low severity, and then be willing to sign up to say, hey, just follow me for the rest of my life, and let's see when the post-acute withdrawal, ends. Because as we stabilize, they become fewer and farther between. The severity levels become less. But this is what I also know to be true. In my 8+ years of practice, is that it also is dependent upon how active you are in creating the lifestyle that you desire, right? So this is, of course, this is the work I do day in and day out with my clients. And this is why some of my clients, are still around for 4 years. I've had people say, well, oh, you're not moving them through. And I'm like, nah, that's not it. It's just, there was still more work to be done, right? So sure, you can get cognitive skill sets to transform your life and find that foundational piece to where you're not knee-jerk, reactive, impulsive, and you've cultivated some distress tolerance and some emotion regulation. You've learned how to self-soothe, and things are better. But with post-acute withdrawal, it's like PMS on crack, right? Like, so if you're not in that frame of mind that says, I want to see myself in a totally different light. I want to be poised, polished, and composed, right? In all of my interactions, like the way that I'm seen and the way that I'm viewed, like that takes some commitment, mm-hmm. right? Because somebody's going to cut you off on the freeway someday, and you're not going to be in the right mental state. You're going to flip the bird. You're going to get anyway, right? So I think that, those that I see that pull away after a program, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days anymore, it just kind of depends. If you stay with just the traditional, it's going to be more like a 90-day situation. But for those people that work for a solid, let's say 12 months, right, on themselves, their post-acute withdrawal is so much less severe. And the reason for that, and remember, I've been watching and tracking and all of these things. The reason for that is because as it creeps up and it comes in, whether they coin it as post-acute withdrawal or not, they say, this is coming up for me. I don't like the way this looks or feels. I'm going to change that, because I get to choose. I get to choose how I experience whatever this is. And so those that don't dedicate themselves to getting through at least their first everything, which means 365 days, right? Their first everything in a year, when something comes up, they're triggered and they're prompted. And if you're in a post-acute withdrawal period, this is where people get the effits. I didn't say the whole word. This is where they get the effits. This is where they just go, I just said, screw it, I'm going to do it. Or they think, oh, I can handle one. I can, anyway, sorry, soapbox. But this is a real thing. So when we are utilizing these other things and we leave our one and we go to another to help us through the tough part of leaving this one, let's do it with purpose, I think is what we're saying, right? Like, let's do this with purpose. Like, I'm going to give this a purpose. It's going to be time limited. And in that purpose, I'm going to be working on what I truly want it to look like on the other side. And so this may mean that you can even go from, say, a prescription to keep you safe during detoxification so that you don't have a seizure. And you utilize that for a period so that you can transition to something that's more organic, more Eastern medicine, etc., and more in line with being in control of however you experience yourself in your environment. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's the key. Is it comes full circle, and it's the whole body. We both talk about whole body health, and it involves that mental capacity. It involves that physical as well, the emotional and the other pieces. There's a lot of spokes to that whole body health wheel. And when you determine that you've made up your mind to not do that, then you're telling and you're training your brain differently. Right. And that's part of the process. That's part of your recovery, and that's good. And when the situations comes up, like on the freeway, and you recognize that early enough, and then you don't have an episode or an attack or whatever you want to call it, because you recognized it, oh, okay, that's something I still need to work on. It's not quite gone. There's other things that'll come up. And I think that's perfect, because that's showing that you are recovering.
Right. And I don't know, I believe we do recover. I know that that's not necessarily, 100% the way people look at that. I believe that we can recover. Does that mean we can re-injure ourselves? 100%. But, I don't believe that we have to live in a world where we're fighting cravings forever, where we have to walk around with a label or, explain away why,
Absolutely. No, I
can't. I just can't, because I'm not something. I mean, other than a recovery lifestyle enthusiast, but I am buying into the label. But that's again a whole different episode. So I want to bring this in because I think this is extremely important, because we're talking about cross addiction, and we're talking about the ramifications that people don't think of, right? So now we've talked about some ramifications of, heavy drinking, anxiety, medication for anxiety, what can happen from there, but also what can happen after that, that cross addiction, even if we weren't given, anyway, the varying scenarios that can play out. So far, we've gotten that far, but let's talk about this, because this is real. And then it's not just real with alcohol, it's real with opiates as well, but, and meth, amphetamines. There's a real damage that we do, that we don't realize that we do, that we exacerbate in our early recovery, because we've already laid the groundwork for there to be issues. And then we add in exuberant amounts of sweets and exuberant amounts of caffeine, right? So, and what I'm referring to here, people, is our teeth, and our nervous system, and our body weight, our fat content, our circulatory system, our pulmonary system, like all of these things, right? So you go, I want to get healthy. I want to turn my life around, yada, yada. I'm giving up drinking. And now I'm not taking the pills, but I drink a gallon of green tea every day. And I believe me, I did that. I'm like, hey, look, 0 carbs, no sugar, but it had that gross saffron or whatever in it that I didn't even realize. But it was like, because I had to have the hand to mouth, and so like it was just all day tea, and so just wired and wired and wired, and then the sweet tooth that most of us have some of, but this real conversion into a full-blown sugar addiction. And believe me, when I was working in residential, they had this, and believe me, I get it. I get why, because it was, partial nonprofit, partial private pay or insurance pay. But they had this big, giant punch dispenser of the red Kool-Aid. It was the red Kool-Aid, and everybody was hepped up on it. And their teeth half the time were stained red, and all of this stuff. And what we don't get is, all of this. I mean, we've already caused our teeth damage. I mean, if you're using meth, we all know you're grinding your teeth. If you're using anything, you're not caring for yourself at the level that you would generally, right? Like I don't know too many, severe addicts that stop to brush their teeth 30 times a day. Although I will say that I do have some addicts that you would never pick out, beautiful models that you wouldn't even know were addicts. But so you look at this and you just go, okay, so we're grinding our teeth, alcohol has tons of sugar, like that's just going in your teeth, going in your gums, ruining it, and it affects your blood pressure. Caffeine totally dehydrates your digestional system. The entire tract just gets totally dehydrated, and then it just doesn't function right. And so we're causing more issue in what we're replacing our alcohol, whatever, with. We're actually, so this goes along the same lines as don't exercise too hard. Don't cross addict. Just don't cross addict.
Right. You've got to be conscious of what, you can't just change from one to the other. I have a client who, prior to me working with her, she quit smoking. She wanted to quit smoking. She was able to quit smoking. Well, what she did, she picked up a habit of munching because she needed that addicted, she needed something in her fingers, the hand to mouth. She needed something in her hand. We got her to a straw. That helped for a little while, and then eventually got her off completely. But it's that thing that we're being codependent on something else. We're just switching it out from one bad to the next bad. I mean, and yes, they're all bad. I'm not going to equate which is worse. There's definitely worse than others, but they all do harm to the one body you have in various different ways.
Process and behavioral addictions are, I believe, to be the primary root cause, because we have like this, when our self-soothing as a pre-adolescent, when we're not able to soothe things and we're not given new tools as life is unfolding for us. Who tells you how to handle your first breakup or the first time somebody calls you ugly? Like, who teaches you how to move through that? Or when, somebody calls you stupid, when you're 12, 13, like, and I think this generation of parents, at least I'm noticing with my grandchildren's parents, so my kids, I don't know why I said that way. That's weird. But what I'm noticing with my kids is that they are more interested in building that self-esteem in helping them, be able to see how it really speaks to the other person versus to themselves, and being okay with being different. But that wasn't the truth when I was a kid. You're not there to make friends or, just discount, whatever it was. I don't even remember. I don't even know if my first breakup, if I even talked to anybody about it, because I think I wasn't even allowed to have a boyfriend. So I think like the whole thing was a secret, and how bad is that? Right. But anyway, so when we're not given those tools, then we start reaching for what we're seeing other people. And we just don't realize that process need of soothing ourselves, that if we can teach the kids, like, don't reach outside of yourself, don't rely on something outside of yourself, right? So when your kids are skinning their knees, don't give them a popsicle. You're just teaching them hand to mouth. When you take them to the doctor, don't say yes to the lollipop. Ask your doctor to remove them before you come in. You're just teaching hand to mouth. Process addiction, like, oh, reward, oh, reward, oh, reward. And at some point in time or another, that's going to gravitate to a joint or an alcohol, or I don't know, these pill parties they're having now where they just like raid their parents' medicine cabinet and throw it in a bowl. What's that? You don't even know what you're taking. Like, no. We got to teach our kids not to look for something outside of themselves to bring peace, joy, comfort, relief, validation, worthiness, whatever. Right? Soapbox. But that's the thing is, we quit smoking. We got to do something about that hand to mouth. Well, and so, yeah, replace it until, if you can replace it appropriately, again, be purposeful.
Right.
Make it time limited. Right. I just have to get past the sugar addiction, because when we munch, what do we normally munch on? We're not grabbing carrots. It's, the box of wheat thins. For me, it was always the wheat thins, because I'm like, oh, they're healthy. No, they're not. They're processed packaged food shoved in a box with a bunch of preservatives.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
the whole box, you're gaining 10 pounds.
You will. And it is. It's meant to be like that, because the advertising is to get you to buy them and think that they're better for you. But yes, I would rather you munch on carrot sticks or celery sticks. And even that has a point. You don't want too much of those, because those could have digestive problems.
People that turn orange from eating too many carrots, I've like literally seen that.
So, yeah.
So I always love having you on. This is so great. So instead of caffeine, and I'll just throw a couple scenarios at you here, or what about this, right? So instead of caffeine, what about kombucha instead? Like, if you got to have something that's flavorful with a little bit of fizz, or, something like that. Like, I know I drink one kombucha a day. And usually they're 2 servings. So yes, I generally try to, constrain myself to just the half of the bottle. 1, it's cost effective. and 2, it's the power of a serving, right?
Right. Well, that is the case. That's another thing. The power of the serving has changed over time because of our serving.
2,100 calorie diet, right?
Exactly. I mean, so our servings, we think 1 can is a serving or 1 bottle is a serving, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, usually it's 2 or 3, or they've changed the calorie content to make it 1 serving, and now it's like 1,500 calories. So you do need to watch those labels. Be careful of those.
And know the calorie, like, based on, like, because if you have a 2,100 calorie a day diet, like, you might, because you might be running marathons and right, like, it has to be based on you. Like, I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, that 1 serving's for my husband, because he's much bigger than I am. Like, literally, I think there's about a foot difference between the 2 of us. And, if I ate a 2,100 calorie diet every day, I would be more of me. right? So I like to say a serving for me is the size of my fist. Now that's hard to equate into fluids though. So do those usually, I've never looked for based on calorie.
It depends upon, it's different. Usually around 6 to 8 ounces is typically a serving, depending upon what it is. Your typical cup of coffee, a cup is 8 ounces, has become a 22-ounce mug that we pick up from our Keurig or from our Starbucks or wherever your favorite. And so, you've got to
12 ounces because I like diluted more. I use the little pod thing.
Yeah.
And if you go for the small one, it's like having espresso, and that's just nasty.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's all relative. You just gotta start reading those labels. So one more thing to educate yourself on. And, when you ask about caffeine, yes, that is a better alternative than drinking tea, lots of caffeinated tea all day long or coffee all day long. If that's what you want to switch it to, or if you can wean yourself to 8 ounces of coffee a day, maybe that's what you need to do. And that suffices you. And then you're drinking water the rest of the day because you're not dehydrating yourself, you're rehydrating.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that idea. Water is the best.
Yes.
Water is the best. And when I get bored with water, because every once in a while I'm like, I feel like I want to taste something. I'll go to the San Pellegrino. They have some that aren't as sweet as others. They just kind of have a hint of flavor. Or I'll just get the plain San Pellegrino mineral water because the mineral in it gives it at least a little bit more flavor.
Yes, exactly.
And then get the bubbles. But for all intent and purposes, I think water is just the best fruit.
Water is the best fruit. I like to flavor my water with fresh lemon or fresh lime. And those are very good. They are a little acidic, so you do have to be careful of your teeth if you're drinking a lot.
The teeth, guys. Keep them.
But if it helps you get that water down, then add that drop of lemon or lime into it. So yes. And
or you can just soak fruit in it, right?
Yes, you can. Yeah, absolutely.
Muddle some strawberries and put it in there.
Yep, strawberries, cucumbers. You see all those when you see. I think of when I've seen on TV or gone to a fancy resort or spa, you see those water with the cucumber and the lemon and the strawberries. You can make your own. You can muddle your own. And then you have fruit flavored water, which is good for you.
Well, and that's what I do when I go out to restaurants, which is what made me think of it is, I usually, I want to have a pretty drink at dinner, so sometimes I'll just ask them to make me whatever, pretty mocktail the bartender wants to make me. And other times I'll just say, can you muddle some strawberries and mint leaf into some soda water for me? Yeah. And they're like, sure. Like this time of year, I can do that a lot because strawberries are around. Yes. So you get to choose seasonally, but there's lots of things that you can do. But I think so. We've come up with know that the things outside of you that you're relying on to bring you peace, joy, comfort, relief, whatever, are not generally, as a rule, an effective approach, and quite frankly, more times than not, exacerbate whatever the issue is. So if you're experiencing this, I'm a codependent, know that it stems from an internal dialogue within you. And so you absolutely 100% can transition out of being that codependent by learning how to live for yourself first without feeling guilty, selfish, punished, or restricted. And by recreating that internal dialogue, you can greatly reduce, if not all, but eliminate anxiety, because I'm living proof. that you can eliminate that anxiety and thereby take away your need to rely on alcohol, prescription medication to bring you to a place where you're not feeling like you're in a hurried panic or fear or whatever, because now you believe and you know, regardless of what other people think, that your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your opinions, your beliefs, your needs, wants, dreams, and desires all hold value, they are valid, and they are worth being experienced, heard, seen, whatever, lived out. And now we go, cool beans. Now I have life balance. I have enough recreation in my life that I don't truly need caffeine to elevate me. Again, that other thing that we reach to outside of us to bring us something. But I gotta have my caffeine, right? Like I'm with you. The first thing I do in the morning is make a cup of coffee. But after my morning coffee, I'm done. I don't need caffeine, whatever, right? Like it's the one thing that that for sure is still there. But when we're thinking about what it causes, right? So if I've got enough recreation, I've got enough physical health things going on in my life, then my system is naturally going to be energized. And if we're being smart and we're being mindful of how much vitamin D we're getting by being outside, and during some months, like this month is generally hard for me because June is quite gloomy. So I usually will beef up my vitamin D as well as my B12 to make sure that my food is creating energy and not just sitting there, right? And so we want to, but you want to do this with somebody that can help you decipher one. So like somebody like me who can help you work on that complete life balance, mind, body, spirit, soul. And then, somebody like Dr. Melissa here who can help you identify when a supplement is right, what supplement is right, what might counteract with any medications that you might be on, because I can make recommendations based on my education of what they say are good supplements to recommend for somebody that's in early, recovery from alcohol, but that doesn't mean it's right for you. Right. So that's why I always say, hey, I don't give advice. These are things that are recommended, but I'm not, you can try them if you want, right? Like cover my CYA. We'll just,
right.
CYA. And this is why, Melissa, I love that you're so open and willing to come in here, even though you have your own show and we've got 3 minutes. Melissa has her own show, guys. And I'm super excited for her. And I will let her share about that. And so while we're in our last 3 minutes of wrap up, I want to make sure you know that Melissa will drop all of her information in the comments. I will drop all of my information in the comments, not that you can't find me or watching on this page, but I'm going to drop it in there anyway. I prefer text messages over anything in the world. So I'm probably just going to drop my cell phone number in there, send me a text. It's just so much easier than chasing down messages all over the world. And so Melissa, tell us where they can engage with you more, because again, I want to take their mindset to a different level, but if, when it comes to this stuff, I want them to be able to reach out to you and say, hey, am I taking too many supplements? Like the comment we had a couple of weeks ago, and, things like that.
Absolutely. So the best way to find me is either on my website, and I'll drop the link below, drmelissavalizan.com, or if you have questions and you want to ask me, and I offer a free 20-minute consultation, and you can just go to askdrmelissa.net and you can book that. If you're going to have longer, there's options for that as well. And so, but book that call, because if you have a question, especially if you're taking something that you're not sure whether it's a synergistic, meaning it interacts in a good way, maybe, or potentiates something to act a little bit more efficient, which is good and bad, or it's counteracting, that could be something as well. So, book an appointment with me so that we can go through that. And Trisha mentioned my new show. You can actually find me on Roku TV and Amazon Fire. I have on the Short Talks TV. So I'm a TV star. You want to check me out?
You're such an awesome lady. I love it. So brave. So brave, but I think that's amazing. You have so much knowledge. I mean, just to think of that, but 52,000 hours of pharmaceutical knowledge, guys. I don't know why we would ask anybody else. I'm just saying. I mean, sure, you maybe can't, write everybody a script that needs it, but boy, wouldn't it be nice to know that we had somebody in our own corner that actually could say, maybe you might want to question why this or why that, or you might want to ask for something alternative, and here's why, or whatever, right? Like helping somebody learn how to be their own advocate is kind of how I see it. That's how it's been functioning in my life, the relationship that we've been building. And anyway, it's 1:00. We all have things to do. Everybody, thank you for joining us. If you want to watch the replay, I will leave it here on my page, but it'll also be on YouTube. If you're not following or subscribing, please do. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.